Okay, here we have the 78 D1 Kawasaki Z1R. As you can see, the first step when you're about to do a carby overhaul is to take those carbies off. So you've got the airbox there. Take out your rubber hoses first. Take those off first so as you have enough room to pull the carbies back towards the airbox by removing the carb to airbox hoses. That allows you the room to remove those carbies once you've loosened the clamps off the inlet manifolds. Once you've released them, mark these cables. Front, and there's a B for back. Front to the front of the carbies, back to the back. Quite simple. Okay, the next step is in order from that one there, even though it's on my right, represents the left-hand side of the bike. Put things back to where they came from. So that's the left-hand side, all the way in order through to the right-hand side of the bike. Do the same with the carb bowl. Where it comes from is where it goes back, and it's going to go back on a whole lot easier if it goes back on where it came from. So after the carb bowl, put your float, needle and float pivot shaft. Put them all down. Put them all down in order and leave them there. And of course, here's the carbs themselves. Once you have them apart, look at these carb bowls. Have a look in there. These are reasonably clean, but I will still give them an ultrasonic clean. If you've got a lot of sediment in there, you've got to ask yourself where it's come from. Follow the fuel line up to the tap. The tap should be cleaned regardless. Before you even start the carb overhaul, look at your tap. Pull it apart, get a new kit if it requires one, and put it also in an ultrasonic cleaner and clean the tap. Then go a little bit further. Go to the source, the fuel. Have a look in that fuel tank. Wash it out, clean it, reline it if there's any rust in there. That preparation is essential. Otherwise, you're going to perpetually, continuously add sediment to the carbs, and all the cleaning under the sun will not help you if it's constantly gummed up with sediment. Okay, most important. Okay, my next step here will be to look at these floats. You need to check these floats for any pitting. Any pitting or corrosion which has perforated the float and allowed an ingress of fuel, effectively turning the float into a sinker, which detracts from its whole purpose. If there's fuel that leaks into that through pitting and perforations caused by corrosion, it won't float and you'll have fuel gushing in. They all need to be checked. How are you going to check them? Quite simple. Put them in some fuel, get a bowl of fuel, drop them in, and watch them float. Don't watch them float for about 5 or 10 seconds. Leave them in there for a good half hour or so, taking note of the level and making sure that they haven't submerged any further. Hold them up to your ear and shake them. Make sure you can't hear any fuel in there. And scales, small scales. Put them on the scales and weigh them. Weigh them before you place them in the fuel, and weigh them after you place them in the fuel. Very important. All these steps add up to a good, effective overhaul. What we're going to look at next is this little fella here. We all know what he is. Spin him around, and see that ridge line there? That needs to be all checked under a magnifying glass for any pitting. Once you put them back together again, you need to supply fuel and see if there's any leak past this seat. That's where your needle goes into. You need to make sure that that needle is seating properly. If it seats properly, you're going to have a good seal, which will not allow any fuel to pass beyond that and into the float bowl. Very important. If you've got a bad needle and seat that's allowing fuel to constantly and continuously leak in, it's going to defy the level set by your float. The next step is to have a look at your float pins for any wear. How do we do that? We put them into the pivot points, slide them through, and we spin them. Spin them by the little pinkies. See what I'm doing? Clockwise, anti-clockwise, any way you like. Now if they spin freely, that tells you that it's not binding. If it gets stuck on those pivot points, it's not going to provide you with an accurate float level. If they're binding, these pivot pins bind on the pivot axles, they'll get stuck, and this here will not give you the proper fuel level, causing the bike or that particular cylinder where that pin binds to either run very lean or very rich. Most important to check that out also. Okay, our next step will be to undo this hex head here on all 4 carbies. All right, so we're going to check the seats. in those. And of course, while we're doing this, we're going to replace most of these bits and pieces with an overhaul carb kit. I suggest, if the bike's been sitting for a very, very long time, that you acquire a kit and replace most of these components. Okay, so here, as you can see, we've removed the needle seats, the hex head needle seats. Here they are, again, stressing, very important to keep everything in line. This is the left-hand side of the bike, working through to the right. As you take them off, leave them in a row. That will tell you that it comes from that particular carby, this being the left-hand side one. Now what we'll do is, we'll pick up the needle seat. I'll have a look up there. Use the sky, okay? See that sky up there? That's the best way to have a look at all your passages to make sure that they're clear. That includes your needle jets, that includes your pilot screws, pilot screw, low idle screw. That means the same thing. Okay, now on here, as you can see, there's a little filter. Okay, there's a little filter. You've got to check that. You've got to look at these things, make sure they're not blocked. But regardless, with that, it goes into the ultrasonic cleaner. These little gaskets will come in your kit, okay? And I suggest you replace them because they're fibre washers. They become hardened with age. They become hardened with constant subjection to a fuel, which is a solvent. And when they become hard, they don't seal. So you get fuel leaking down past here, down past the threads, and into your bowl, increasing the fuel level in your bowl. So it actually bypasses the needle altogether. Okay, keep an eye on it. So we put that back. Everything's got a home. Everything must be in order. Okay, the next thing we'll do is we'll take out this particular fellow there. Here's the needle jet. Okay, your needle slides down into there. The needle, of course, is in the middle of that slide. You can't see it there, but you access it up here. There's an adjustment up there which raises and lowers that slide. Okay, so to do this next one, you'll need an 8mm to take the needle jets out. Okay, as you can see here, we've now removed all the needle jets. Again, placed back in their respective rows in the order they belong, representing the carby they came from. Can't stress that. Now, have a look at this. I'll get some focus there for you. You can just see those 3 holes. Should have another 2 as I rotate it. There's another 3, yep. So there's 3 there, 3 there, and 3 there. Okay, our friend the sky. You can just see for clearing there. Okay, those passengers are clear, but I have cleared these before. They were blocked. Just rotate it around slowly until the next 3 come into being. Just see them. There you go. They're clear. What you need to do, check the passages. If it's sat for a long time, the fuel crystallizes, it gums up, especially if one champion has left the fuel tap on and allowed the fuel to remain in the bowl and back up someone who's left the fuel tap on and back up all the way back through the bowl, back up through the needle and needle seat, all the way back up to the tank. It backs up, and while it sits there, it gums and crystallizes everything it comes into contact with. Okay, there's the gaskets are still on there, as you can see, black in colour, been there for some time. I wouldn't start pulling those gaskets off until you ensure that the gasket in your kit fits. Okay, so just place the new ones up over there, make sure they fit. And if they fit, well then remove the old ones. Okay, the next step here is to release my little finger there, release that little spring. You can just see him in underneath there. I've released that from that arm there. That's your next step, release that spring. Then come up here and you undo the throttle valve shaft lock nuts. Right, so I've just got to manage this carb somehow and show you, which is that one there where my fingernail is. And that's what they look like. That's what they look like here. Okay, those little nuts there. Once you finish those, put them all there, just below the caps, and we'll get on to the next step, which is removing the rubber caps on either end, which is those there. Okay, and then what we'll do is we'll remove, just there you can see a hexagonal nut. Got to get it to him. Okay, that one there that I got my finger on. And below, just cables stay in front of it. There's the idle screw up there, and he's just down below there. That's locked into the shaft. Your throttle shaft activation, which activates all 4 valves, or slides if you like, into carburetor and gets them to open up at the same time. Okay, so once that little bolt, that lock bolt, has been taken out from the cable activation bracket, you then come over to here. I might just be able to point that out to you. Just in there, you can see that little fellow there. You can undo that. And you'll see, once you undo that, there's a little lock tab. It acts like a lock tab. So that comes out. That's him there. Once you take that little tab out, the fellow there, you can see the recess where it slid down into. Just got to get me bearings here. Just there where my fingernail is. You can see where that lock tab slid down into. So that's basically to keep the shaft in one place, to stop the end float on either side of the carb. Okay, so now I can just put my pinky in there. You will be able to slide that shaft out. So I'm applying pressure, and here it is. See it moving out now. Okay, that allows that shaft to freely move out. Once you've removed that throttle shaft, take note. There's one lock bolt retainer that's very, very close to the edge. Okay, so at this stage now, all the components have been separated and they've been placed in their respective rows. They're all in order, and I can't stress enough, they must go back where they came from. It does make it a whole lot easier. Rather than having all these bits and pieces scattered here and there, they're all in order and they go back in the way they came out. Now these have been ultrasonically cleaned. If you have an ultrasonic cleaner, you'll clean them, give them a good 5 minutes, 3 or 4 times over. What it's going to do is it's going to dislodge all the gumming and crystallization, and the ultrasonic cleaner gets into those little passageways in through there, through the pilot jet or idle jet, pilot jet, idle jet, that's the same thing. It'll get through all those little passages where it's physically impossible to access. That's the benefit of that ultrasonic cleaner. But if you have not got an ultrasonic cleaner, get yourself some carb and throttle cleaner. Take out all the idle jets, as you can see here. That's where they go. Take them out, put the nozzle in there and spray, spray, spray. Go through about 3 or 4 cans. Make sure they're all done properly. And while you're there, clean them on the outside. Clean them on the outside first, then clean them on the inside next. As you can see here, I've actually put the needle seat back in. Okay, now there's new fibre washers in there. Make sure they're all the same thickness. Make sure they're the same thickness as the ones that were originally there. That all assists with the correct float level. When you set your floats, the distance recommended will be retained. That will remain consistent. If you get really thick washers here and then a thin washer on the next one and a little bit thinner over there, you're not going to have equal float levels because your seat is going to be a little bit proud. Keep those washers the same thickness as the ones that came out. Bye for now. Okay, we'll move on to our next step. What I'm going to do here we go. There's your pilot jet. You see him there? Little hole through there. You'll see him if you point him up to the sky. Pilot jet, it's also known as an idle jet. I'm going to start putting them in. Where do they go? They go back in where it come from. Okay, so in this case, you probably see one that I've already got in there. Over to here. There it is, just down in there. So the next one, if I can just juggle this carby will be in there, in that smaller hole. Okay, and when you're putting them in, now remember, these have already been cleaned, either ultrasonically or with throttle carb, having stuck the nozzle in there with a throttle carb and body cleaner and cleaned those passages thoroughly to get rid of the gumming and crystallization. Now when you're putting those in, okay, if I may point out, these are very fine little components. Just nip them up. As you can see, this one here is numbered 15. Might not be able to see it, but it's a 15. So that's a standard idle pilot jet for a Z1R D1 and others, no doubt. Mine had a 17.5 in there, and I was always wondering why it ran a little bit too rich. 17.5 compared to 15 has a large orifice and will make anywhere from 0 to 1/8 of a throttle much more richer. Okay, putting soot and fouling up the plugs. So just gently, bently nip those up. Nip them up with minimum torque. Nip them up in a way where they remain secure, but not in a heavy monkey-fisted way where you strip those fine threads. Okay, so what we've done now is, as you know, we've put the needle seats back in. We've also, don't know if you can see them there, just see them down in there. The pilot jet, idle jet, they've gone back in, and they've gone back in on all four, and we've also got the main jets back in. So all those have been cleaned, ultrasonically cleaned or carb cleaned. And as you're putting them back in, just check all those orifices again, make sure they're clean. Don't take it for granted that you have cleaned them. Something may have flown into them, so just check them before they go in. So we've got our gaskets in there. Okay, this one here still needs a gasket on there. Okay, I've done the first one here. The second one, there's a little sleeve there. The little sleeve will just fall out of there. There it is. That little sleeve gets taken out, and that needle just gets dropped into there. Okay. That's how it goes. Now with these ones here, for that type of needle, it's the third notch down. Okay. Bloody hard to get some focus here. I can't even get any focus. I might be able to see it there. There we go. You can just see those notches. It's the third one down. For that pin there, that's the setting, third one down. For most, it's the third one down. Okay, and that then just slides down into there, like thus. It's very hard to hold it up. And that little sleeve just slides down onto the top. Okay, when placing these slides into the barrels, you can just see a little ridge there in line with the carb body. Well, that little ridge, pretty hard to highlight it, but there it is down there. You can just see it. It's in each of them. that little ridge slides down in between that groove on the throttle valve. Very careful when you put those in. I've already put that one there in. When you put these in, keep that, if you keep it in line with just down there, gently, ever so gently slide that in, you will feel it. You'll find that it's hard. So you'll feel it slide in. There it is. It slides all the way into the bottom. Just allow that to sit up there, like that. Make sure these tabs are squashed into the lock washers. So they'll just sit there until we put that slide back in. Okay. Now also, very important is the location, those little screws there. Just see them there. Those two screws, they fit into those two holes. Okay, so we've got the throttle valves in, and once we've got all four of them in, we then proceed to put the shaft in. Now remember the importance of laying everything down in order. Well, this is why. That hole there, that's very, very close to the end compared to the other hole, well, that hole there that's close to that end is the choke end. Okay, so you're going to slide that in, that end there, in through this end. Okay, that's how they sit on the bike. That there's your left side of the bike, that there's your right side of the bike. Front being down this way, back of the bike being down there. Before we go any further, before you put that shaft on, you'll see little recesses, little grooves. Those grooves there line up with these shaft supports. There they are there. There's one. There's your second one. There's your third one. So fill them up with a good molybdenum grease, the disulfate one, okay? There you go, just fill them up. They're like little channels. Fill them up with grease before you slide that back in. Clean that shaft up nicely before it does go back in. Now, once you get that bolt in there on the choke end, once you locate that into the shaft, there's a thread in the shaft. Just do that bolt up loosely. Once you align that one, all the others, you can just see in there, they're just starting to line up. I'll move that over a bit, there you go. Slide that over. You can just see it wanting to line up with that hole. Do the last remaining 3 carbies. Just tighten those up once you've done. That'll lock the throttle body levers onto the throttle shaft. Okay, once you've tightened down those retaining bolts that hold the throttle valve levers or actuating arms on the throttle valve shaft. Once you've tightened them down, just lift your throttle valve arm up like that. Okay, Make sure there's no resistance there, and it's all happening freely. There's some resistance, slight resistance, but what I'm talking about is a binding resistance that stops you from actuating. It stops you from creating this movement. Okay, slight resistance is acceptable, but I mean, if it binds and notches up, there's something wrong. Go back in and do that again. Okay, once we've done those bolts on the throttle shaft, don't forget the little retaining bolt, same size as the throttle shaft bolts, goes into there. You can just see them there, that one there. Don't forget that one. Okay, the next one is the idle adjustment screw, and that spring, the return spring, plus the locating notch. Now that little retainer clip that I showed you, that's it there. You can just see it. It saddles the throttle shaft. The throttle shaft's got a little locating notch on it. Now it actually inserts into that, and what it does is it stops the end float. It centralizes that shaft and stops any end float, either off towards the choke lever or off to the other side. So most important that you don't forget that. Okay, the next thing is we fit that spring. The throttle return spring is fitted. Next thing we'll do is we can get these little caps, little end caps, and slip them back into either side.